So I just did a video with Diane Feinstein being smug, I would say being a dick to kids who were there pushing for the Green New Deal. Now, these kids were part of the Sunrise Movement, and their requests, you could even say to some degree plea, was that Diane Feinstein sign on to the Green New Deal. Now, these kids have been going all over, and they've been making their rounds in the various offices. But in this particular case, Diane Feinstein, even though she listened, she stood there for like 12 minutes to hear him out, was being smug and patronizing to the kids that were there. And in one case is saying, look, I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for 30 years. In another case, telling the kid, maybe you should run for Senate. And making every excuse in the world. Oh, we can't afford it. Here's my deal. It'll never pass, etc., etc., etc. As if her deal was going to pass. And even if you craft a deal that has the ability to pass, if the deal doesn't necessarily do anything to deal with the problem, what's the point in taking the weight in order to get that deal to pass? The overarching idea of the Green New Deal is not that it's perfect. It's not that it's going to be exactly, these kind of that it's not going to be changed and that it is immutable. That's not the point. The point is we have a pressing issue. There's an asteroid that is going to hit the planet, a proverbial asteroid that's going to hit the planet. Scientists have said we have 12 years. That, I would say, is greatly optimistic. And that also assumes that there is somewhat of a constant rate of worsening of the issue when it hasn't necessarily shown a constant rate of worsening of the issue. Meaning, scientists only come up with a model of the world. You can't mistake the model for the real thing. And just because you have a model doesn't necessarily mean every issue and element of the model is accurate, meaning that the results will vary in real objective reality. My point is this. Scientists giving you that is not necessarily what they know as a flat fact, it's what they're giving you somewhat as an estimate. In fact, of the matter is, it could already be too late. There may not be anything that we can necessarily do about it, but there may be. The question becomes, do we, as a world, as a globe, even just us as a society, are we willing to take the responsibility for our planet and acknowledge that what we're doing, our behavior on this planet is creating problems from the standpoint of our larger habitable space? You get up every day, you eat your Cheerios, you may have sex with your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever, you do your job, you come back home, you rinse, repeat, and you call that a life. Fact of the matter is we're a ball hurling through space. There is I can't say above us because there's no such thing as up and down. Up and down is purely relative to where we are. But you get my point. The job and everything else, yes, that's life, but there's a reality to what we do on this planet and the real world implications of those actions on this planet. And if the things we're doing on this planet are putting chemicals, we're taking stuff out of the ground and burning that stuff into the sky, and we're finally found, okay, we get technologically advanced enough to realize, oh my God, there's a problem here. Our living, the way that we've organized our affairs on this planet is destroying our life on this planet. Something needs to be done. An argument against it has to take into account that what we're talking about is an utter catastrophe for life on Earth. Arguments saying that we can't afford it and all this other stuff hefted against life on Earth seem to, fall a little shallow in context of what we're talking about. Ocasio Cortez gets wind of Senator Feinstein being a dick to those kids, and her being the proponent and the main pusher of the Green New Deal. And yes, that Green New Deal has been confiscated from the Green Party. And yes, it's not the same deal as the Green Party was issuing. It has been appropriated and shifted and twisted or tweaked in the context of the Democratic Party. All that's true. Some of the objectives are over the top, meaning you're not going to be able to get that stuff done in a decade. I even to some degree agree with that. But whether you can accomplish all the objectives of the Green New Deal is somewhat immaterial. It's a start, and at the very least gives you an objective to shoot for that tries to deal with the issues that present. Whether or not it's a complete solution to is secondary to the fact that it's an overarching objective. Let's hear Ocasio Cortez. Let's get her position on this. She rips Diane Feinstein on this, at one point calling her a political coward. And she's doing all of this while making like jumbo or something. Like she's making like a soup while she's going after Diane Feinstein. This is awesome. Let's take a look at this. God, 8 minutes. That's too long for my own 2 cents.
Okay, so many sweet potato cubes. Yeah, everyone, I'm making chili. Someone said, please explain the Green New Deal. Thank you for asking. So the whole premise of the Green New Deal is that we're screwed on climate. Like, I'm sorry to break it to you. If we do nothing, there is no hope. Period. That's just a principle across the board. If we do not act, there is no hope. The only time we can hope is when we act. But when it comes to climate in particular, we're actually screwed. There is a global threat to the planet. A global threat. And at this point, we don't even have to prove it. Just walk outside in winter in a lot of places, and it's either way worse than you're used to or way warmer than you're used to. Hurricanes, storms, wildfires. We are dying now. For 40 years, and we've never addressed it. In fact, the issue's gotten worse. So I don't think that working on an issue for 30 years alone is what qualifies is what makes someone qualified to solve an issue. That said, there are a lot of people that have been doing this work for decades, that have proposed ambitious solutions for years and have not been listened to. So it's not just, I've been doing this for 30 years, so we need to listen to them. Because frankly, people have been failing at the same things for 30 or 40 years. What we need to do is say,
oh, they're going to hate her. They're going to hate her guts. Wow. I love that. I got to be honest, I hadn't listened to this video. I mean, but the argument kind of just makes itself, right? If your argument is, I've been doing this for 30 years, and it's like, then why are we in your office? Why are we talking to you? Why are we bitching at you? Why do we have these signs? Why are we eating cake and ice cream somewhere and playing with our friends? We're 10 years old, for fuck's sake. Why are we sitting in your office if you've been doing this for 30 years? Fact of the matter is, you've been failing at your job for 30 years. I love it. God, I love that. They are going to hate her. They are going to hate her big time. I mean, for all intents and purposes, she just said Diane Feinstein has been failing for 40 years. That's fucking hilarious.
4 decades that have proposed ambitious solutions for years and have not been listened to. So it's not just, I've been doing this for 30 years, so we need to listen to them. Because frankly, people have been failing at the same things for 30 or 40 years. What we need to do is say, what solutions have not been tried yet? And what ambitious scale have we not shot at yet? And let's do it. Let's do it. Because if you think that a carbon tax alone and no other intervention is going to fix climate change, you're part of the problem. It is part of a solution. A carbon tax could be part of a solution. But to think that any one thing is going to get us out of this mess is basically pretending that it was just one thing that got us into it.
She's right, by the way. I mean, pretending to do something is almost as bad as, you can even make an argument, maybe worse than not doing anything at all. With a Republican saying, I don't believe in climate change, okay, fair enough. I can make that argument that this guy doesn't believe in science. And between his word versus the word of scientists, they are our high priests of our era. I suppose that people will err on the side of him by the majority. However, a Democrat saying, I believe it, and this is my solution to it, even though that solution is not really a solution at all, it's a soothing incrementalism that doesn't necessarily solve the problem but makes people feel like they're doing something. It's like recycling. It's like, oh, I threw a can into the container. Yes! I've done something about climate change. Fact of the matter is, no. Recycling may make you feel good, but it in and of itself is not a thing that's going to actually solve the issue. Most of this issue is caused by either animal farming or gas. That's not you throwing a can in a container. Just saying. There's a difference between feeling that I've done something versus actually getting something done. Her point here is Diane Feinstein is dangerous in this case, almost as dangerous, if not more so, than Republicans, because at the very least for Republicans, you know that they're not going to do anything, as opposed to the soothing balm that you may convince people that they are doing something when in actuality, they're not really getting anything done at all, at least in the context of doing something to solve the problem.
And we know that that's wrong. We know that that's wrong. And we basically need to propose a solution on the scale and of the magnitude of the problem. We have one shot. We have one shot. Because we could have had 3, 4, 5 shots at this. But to be very frank, people didn't try. For 30 or 40 years, they wrung their hands and they said it's too complex. And now people are dying in the thousands. And I'm just not here to listen to this basic, like this belief that is not grounded in reality, that the more 40 years, and we've never addressed it. In fact, our planet is going to face disaster if we don't turn this ship around. And so it's basically like there's scientific consensus that the lives of children are going to be very difficult, and it does lead, I think, young people to have a legitimate question. You know, is it okay to still have children? And I mean, not.
My wife asked this. My wife asked that question. It's like, do you really want to bring kids into this planet when they're telling you that this planet is going to take an L? And what is going to be the life of those kids if you bring them into this planet? Life on Earth. What does it look like in 50, 60 years? Like, what is the world that they're going to inhabit and inherit from us? That's that's not just her asking that question. I would imagine people who accept the science as being legit should ask that question. I think part of the problem here is the scale of the problem is so big or such a magnitude that it doesn't feel like you can do anything about it. And it feels like it's so big that it's hard to understand finality, right? Like, you're being told that, look, your life on this planet is going to fundamentally change if you keep going the way you're going. You're going in an unsustainable path from the standpoint of maintaining life on this planet. It is hard to kind of grasp this idea of a global catastrophe in this way. Like, they occur. At some point, there are going to be asteroid strikes on the planet. Those things are not necessarily ruled out. At some point, there's going to be an earthquake. At some point, there's going to be a hurricane. All those things. But in this case, this is one of those things that we ourselves are creating. And the scientists, I don't necessarily think scientists are perfect. But in this particular case, their predictions have been skewed to the worst of things, meaning it's worse than what the predictions are showing. She's right. I guess I'm just making the point that she's right. But it's I think the scale of the problem is so big and the magnitude of the problem is so big that it's hard to kind of reconcile. And so when you're trying to think of, okay, how do we solve this issue? The old mode of thinking, or the current mode of thinking, is how much it's going to cost. But understand, we're talking about life on the planet itself. Can you really attach a cost to that? Or do you really just have to get things done? There's a difference in those things. Do you really let the planet take a hit because you couldn't necessarily afford to pay the bill, even though you make dollars? Like, I guess I find this I find being on this side of the argument aggravating, because this side of the argument says the planet is at stake. If we don't do anything, the planet's at stake. If we do something, I guess I'll say it this way: if we're wrong, if I'm wrong, we just get a cleaner world. If the detractors are wrong, and the only thing they're basing this off is their gut feeling, because the scientists for the most part are in almost consensus, then the world takes a hit. And I'd argue the world's already taking a hit. And it goes beyond just climate. It goes into vegetation, nutrients in our food, all sorts of stuff. It's hard to predict how we will be affected from the standpoint of the habitable space. We can predict some things, we can't predict all those things. And the question becomes, do you really want to take that risk?
Not just financially, because people are graduating with $20,000, $30,000, $100,000 worth of student loan debt, and so they can't even afford to have kids in a house. But also just this basic moral question, like, what do we do? And even if you don't have kids, there are still children here in the world, and we have a moral obligation to them, to leave a better world for them. And this idea that if we just, I've been working on this for X amount of years, it's like not good enough. Like, we need a universal sense of urgency, and people are trying to introduce watered down proposals that are frankly going to kill us. A lack of urgency is going to kill us. It doesn't matter if you agree that climate change is an important issue. At this point, it doesn't matter. If you believe climate change is a problem, that's not even the issue. It's the issue is how urgently you feel we need to fix it. And if you do not have a sense of urgency to try to turn this around in 10 years, how is that different than a person who's just...
She's been watching my channel. She's taking my arguments. She's taking my arguments. I've said the same thing. It's like you saying you believe in climate change. I mean, if at the end of the day you're not doing anything about it or anything substantial and real to actually change it, it's like hide under your desk in case of a nuclear bomb blast. As if hiding under your desk is going to somehow protect you from the nuclear fire. I'm going to end this. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the PayPal or Patreon. This video is going way, way, way too long. But I have another video coming up almost immediately after this one, about 5 or 10 minutes. That one will have to be fast because I have an interview at 1 p.m. on Sham Sharma's channel. So I will be back in probably 5 minutes or so. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. And shout out to Ocasio Cortez for not taking any shit off of Diane Feinstein, who's been apparently failing at her job for 40 years. Thanks all.